What are cryptocurrencies?
Hey, hey, hey.
What are NFTs?
A non-fungible token.
Time to buy Bitcoin.
Bitcoin just seems like a scam.
What's up, Bitcoin?
Hello everyone, welcome back to On The Ledger. It's been a while, but I'm back once again on your weekly rendezvous from Paris after a short and much needed winter break. I hope you all enjoyed your holidays and are ready for an amazing year ahead. 2021 will probably be remembered as the year crypto went beyond crypto to become a vibrant and thriving cultural and financial ecosystem with real-world utility for creators and communities. We were lucky enough to explore this inspiring Web3 shift on here by your side, and this year we'll be doing more of that on The Ledger to take you with us on a journey to discover innovative projects, inspiring artists and creators, as well as exclusive Ledger integrations. I honestly couldn't be more excited or thrilled about 2022. I also couldn't be more thrilled about today's guest. To kick off the year on The Ledger, we're glad to have a pretty unique and fascinating artist. One that caught my attention right away due to his original approach to NFTs when he started releasing on Hickenunk in 2021. Our guest today has a thing for literature and storytelling. He's an actor, a writer, a poet, and a producer who's been pushing the boundaries of crypto art with his poems and captivating collaborations with some of the best visual artists of the Tezos ecosystem. Like with the Swan Song, for example.
I have looked upon those brilliant creatures, and now my heart is sore. All's changed since I, hearing at twilight, the first time on this shore.
Our guest today is, of course, Laurence Fuller. Laurence, welcome to On The Ledger and Happy New Year. How are you feeling today?
Hi, Happy New Year. Yeah, great to be here today, yeah. And thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Pleasure. Been very much looking forward to that since we first chatted a few months ago. So let's get to it. On The Ledger, Season 2, The Word of Laurence Fuller. Here we go. So, let's start from the beginning. I love storytelling, so you graduated from theater school, then kicked off your acting and writing career, and last year you started experimenting with NFTs. Tell us the story of your Lightbulb Moment, because, we all have one when we realize that, wow, NFTs are actually a thing that we can, explore.
The aha moment with NFTs.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess it had been almost a year of lockdown and a year of the theaters all being shut down, a lot of filming being shut down, hardly much film or television production, and a sort of real hankering and need for performance and, I suppose, live performance, any kind of performance, especially in my life. We watched a lot of films in that year. I'd written a novella, I'd written a screenplay, I'd written a lot of poetry, but, I've been an actor all my life and a trained one and dedicated my life to it. So I guess I'd heard about NFTs through Clubhouse.
Yeah, interesting. Again, we all spent a lot of time on Clubhouse during lockdown.
Yeah, and I'd been in crypto since about 2017.
Okay.
And when I heard someone talking about NFTs, I basically just needed about 2 sentences before I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. And I need to just go into this head first. And I'd actually had a bunch of spoken word poetry art collaborations that I had already been doing for a couple years before that. And just immediately minted my first piece, which was a collaboration with Sima Joe, an artist who's a friend of mine and just a terrific painter.
Childish force of nature, my swelling body swims with salt drops dropping in pools of unexpected pleasure, crashing water weeds washing over the spirits with me. Together we crossed over the top layer before we get sucked under, the other underneath pulled out to sea.
I'd written this poem inspired by her paintings when I went to visit her studio and conversations with her years before. So I think I already had that. I think I re-recorded the performance and then did a bit more with the visuals. I started exploring how to animate a painting with those first pieces, and then just minted right away on OpenSea. And I was the first spoken word poetry NFT.
So, what were those 2 sentences? Because I'm super, super curious. Must have been pretty impactful. If you remember, of course.
Oh gosh. I think it was just someone explaining in a really basic room of just like NFT, it's like a token you create on the blockchain of your art. I think it was just that. I think anyone who's outside of crypto and outside of the arts, it does take a minute. A lot of people in the arts, it takes a minute for them to understand. But I think if you come from both, then it's just really, that's all you need to understand, I think.
I think it helped that you were already in crypto as well. Because for most artists, it's a steep learning curve. You've got to learn about, NFTs, platforms, self-custody, security, and everything related to that. But you already had some sort of a, decent amount of knowledge, if I understand this correctly.
Yeah, I'd understood it. I wasn't using crypto for anything other than having it on an exchange and trying trading terribly. It turns out I'm a terrible trader, as most people are. I assume. And that was about it. I was really interested in what these projects were doing. Projects like ICX and the Interoperability Alliance really caught my imagination for how they could integrate into daily life. And it felt like a secret world that I was a part of for a couple of years. And actually one that I wasn't really able to speak about much, because before NFTs, it was mostly just about finance. And nothing else in my life was really about finance except what I was doing with it personally. So it didn't really make sense to talk about it much. But then when it became about art, I was like, okay, I can talk about this all the time.
That's why we're here. Let's talk about your art. So, your art is quite captivating. Your work is at the intersection of literature, music, and of course, visual arts. Could you tell us more about your creative vision and how you see it coming to life through the NFT medium as one other medium that you're adding to the different mediums that you were previously exploring?
Poetry, the last 3 or 4 years of my life really became a big factor. I would spend sometimes days writing poems at cafes. And sometimes that had been the best thing that I'd done all week. I had a routine going where I would go to Muay Thai kickboxing first thing in the morning, and then I would go to a cafe and I would write poetry until I had to bartend that evening, or an audition or filming something as well. But in between, what I was doing was writing a lot of poetry in cafes. I wrote about 2 books of poetry in a year. It was kind of like a mad creative flurry. And I think it was also kind of a cataclysm of a lot of creative things that were going on within me. I was studying a lot of my late father's writings for the screenplay that I was writing about him. And his writings really impacted me and his whole world, because my late father was an art critic and a very opinionated and challenging character in the story of 20th century art, particularly in England. He was a great debater and polemicist. So he really, when you read his writings, they're very sort of emotionally fueled and extremely engaging. And so I'd spent a lot of time reading his work. And I also found from his friends that what he really wanted to do was be a poet. I also found a manuscript of unpublished poetry that he had. And I found poems in his early magazine that he created, and poems that he'd write in his letters. I was very inspired by those as well. And to find that he was inspired a lot by writers like Baudelaire. And Baudelaire was a poet who, wrote a lot autobiographically, but also about paintings. Paintings feature throughout Flowers of Evil in every other poem. He's got 2 poems that are dedicated to talking about Delacroix and Goya. And so I suppose all that just kind of inspired me to start writing poetry from it, using a painting as the muse, and then combining that autobiographically with my own experience, and sort of having it become the poem is about the experience of art, one's own subjective experience of art. And within that, telling the story of one's own emotional life, telling a story, and using the painting as the visual symbology as well, I just found really enhanced it and could be just a powerful storytelling tool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely fascinating, I think, when you combine the poetry, the music, and the visual aspect. It's kind of mesmerizing, to be honest. And, maybe we can go back like a few steps to your first drop. I think it was back in March 2021 on Ethereum and OpenSea, if I'm not mistaken. But then you quickly moved to Tezos and Hickenlunk. Why is that? And what do you think, what was like your learning curve like?
I was on Clubhouse at the time, uh, like making a lot of my connections in NFT on Clubhouse. Although I think I was finding most of my collectors from Twitter, but I was, talking to that whole crew from who are really prominent NFT artists from OpenSea now, and it was during the time when Ethereum just went from 1,000 to 4,000, and the gas fees went up tremendously, and there was a real slump, to be honest, in Ethereum art, except for maybe the super rare pieces. And I hadn't applied to super rare at that time, and I still haven't yet. And then I kept hearing about Hickenlunk in Clubhouse rooms, like people, the word Hickenlunk everywhere. Like, and then one of my friends asked me, "Are you going to drop a piece on Hickenlunk?" I'm like, what is everyone talking about? And then they come into rooms with like these numbers on their profile, and it was their object numbers. And so I went into one of the rooms, and it was just like a flurry of activity. People were talking about art, and they were sharing it, and people were like collecting in the room really fast and a lot. It didn't really happen that much on Ethereum. It was like, you'd make a sale once in a while, but on Hickenlunk, everyone was just collecting and selling their work all the time. The energy about it was just really infused.
The culture is different, I feel, because Ethereum is so big when you think about it. There are so many things happening on Ethereum, whereas when you think about it, Tezos is like this, like you were saying, like this niche of artists that was flourishing at the time and that now is growing, which is fascinating. NFTs have brought artists and different collectors closer together than they have ever been. Creators are now able to finance their own projects thanks to this narrow relationship with the collectors, without having to rely on studios or third parties or agencies for financing or distribution. So if you think of it, one of the first things you told me when we chatted back, on Twitter, is that you were a big fan of Lost Poets. And Lost Poets is a gigantic project that I suppose needs a decent amount of capital in order to be able to finance it. But one of the questions I was asking myself is, if NFTs didn't exist, would PAC have been able to launch a project at such scale without the support of a third party that would have the constant ability to say, oh, you do this, or no, that's not creative enough, or we're not sure if that's going to speak to people or not. So the basic question was, are NFTs liberating creativity? Do you think the way you're exploring your creativity is different because you're emancipated from the third parties?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, an actor, especially, because so much of a life as an actor is waiting for someone else to hire you to be able to do the job. And then you're dependent on what sort of job you get. Like, they give you the script, and that's the script. And quite often, like, you don't have much say in what roles you end up getting and taking on. And you kind of just have to accept that. And that's just the actor's life. But then it's interesting to see like who was really fired up creatively in between those jobs, and who was really like passionate artist, as well as being someone who was hired for a job. I think that's a differentiation really between like an artist and someone who's doing the job, and you need people to do the job.
Since we're speaking, about this community and cultural aspects, I think that this narrow relationship between creators and their audiences, it's becoming clear that the success of any project or artist is partly due to the artistic project itself, but predominantly in the NFT space, it's starting to feel like the culture and community that are surrounding that project are becoming a very important factor as well. What's your take on that, and on your relationship with your collectors and community building?
I mean, my gosh, I've made so many new friends. I don't think I've had this many people as sort of close to me that I talk to every day in my life. It's really interesting, and sometimes I just sort of like just falling into it. And like after a drop, if I'm really tired, I'll just be like chatting to people all day before I like pick up the next poem. it's really fun, and it's kind of, it can be a bit of a soap opera as well. Like there's always something going on in different relationships, and particularly with like Twitter spaces as well. Like there's always a Twitter space now. If you ever feel like you want to chat to someone, like you just switch it on, and like there's about 5 different rooms, people talking about NFTs and art, and you really have your choice of like, who you want to engage with about what. It's kind of interesting to see as well, because I love participating in theater and film because of that community, that family aspect of it. Like you just feel a part of a family, and like you've created something really special together. And it's really sad when that finishes. Everyone feels like there's this loss, of like you lost a family. But now, like with NFTs, you kind of always will have that. Yeah, they're always there. Like my group threads on Twitter are always firing off. Like on Tezos, the artists are really close, and I suppose that's because we also collect each other's work, and we also collaborate so much. So yeah, it's been fantastic, like connecting with these really talented people in this way that's like very just deep and real. And yeah, the relationships have been formed, like I hope to keep my whole life.
Yeah, that's amazing. And one of the interesting things you said there was, related to the fact that it was kind of always on. But there's another interesting aspect there, is that art is now one click away. Like whatever you and I collect, anyone else can see, and it doesn't belong like in a to a bunker in Switzerland or like a closed museum. I think that, and most of the artists are participating in that by collecting each other's work and sharing each other's work. And what I feel is that, what started off as a revolution of finance and money is kind of starting to become a cultural renaissance. Do you share that feeling?
The Renaissance was fueled by all the merchants coming in, and also funding by the church. And the Renaissance was fueled by a new way of
Exchanging value and ideas.
yeah, and also like a new financial, I don't want to say class, but it was like groups and ways of doing things, like the Medicis. And obviously they were very responsible for funding like a huge amount of the art that was going on. And interestingly, the church, like so much of the art from that time had religious symbology. So I suppose like you kind of see that in some crypto art, like they use the branding of Ethereum or Tezos, a specific kind of symbology. But I don't know if that was always the interesting thing about Renaissance art, was the symbology. I think like the artists that really survived from that period, I mean, they did paint about religious symbology, but it was also how distinct their own voices were. People like Caravaggio, who even painted himself within a lot of his paintings, and just created such a distinct voice for himself that you can tell a Caravaggio from anybody else in a museum. So glaringly so, if you come upon it, it's like, wow, what is that? The Romantic movement, which spurred on at that time, was kind of a reaction to that, in saying that, we're animals, we're people, and we need the world around us. And also kind of accepting these changes that were coming, like in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. A big part of that was, how will science change like the human being? And I think we're sort of experiencing a bit of that as well, where this is such a technological revolution that is really going to change how we do things. I think we're also experiencing some of that, like leaving, how we're going to, we're at the intersection of the old and the new. How do we relate to the old world? And yeah,
And I think your work is kind of a depiction of that, because you're using a very innovative medium and a very technologically advanced medium, but to tell things that are culturally very anchored in the history of our arts. And speaking of that, you've had amazing collaborations in the past, and you've kicked off the year with an impressive one with the artist Ruben Fro. So congratulations first. But what else are you planning for 2022? Any sneak peeks?
Thank you. Yeah, the piece with Ruben was a long time coming. Super proud of it. It feels like I had to take a couple days break afterwards, because it was really like, once it was locked in, like me and Ruben were going to be doing the dissolving painting number 8. I mean, it was a week of us just kind of 24/7, not much sleep, just trying to get this as good as we possibly can.
A ship, far off, across the breached abyss of night, they post their hope to that mast, which rips through the vast colors of the dawn.
And then the drop, we wanted to do that. We had our own Twitter space, and I wanted to give this series like the space it deserved as well, because the Dissolving Painting series has been a really important one in Tezos culture, and really a prominent series and an important series in what's gone down. And not everybody knew that, so I wanted to sort of show each piece, and we had Ruben's Dissolving Paintings up like one side by side in the space. It was great. So what am I working on next?
The interesting question.
I guess I can talk about a project that I'm working on, which is maybe has some, you mentioned Lost Poets before, maybe has some, is inspired a little bit by Lost Poets, and is working with just one of the best painters in the world in Heinrich Dahlin. And I connected with Heinrich actually through Tezos World as well, surprisingly, because this guy's got almost 1 million followers on Instagram. He's just well respected as just one of the best painters in the world. I saw him popping up in the Hicketnunk rooms. I was like, holy shit, that's Heinrich Dahlin. Like, and so obviously I got chatting to him and was like, and now he's a close friend. We speak every other day, and we're working on a project that I feel could take the idea of a collection to another level and make it an art project, as well as all those things that go into making like a good collectible project great. So I think that's really hard to do and really rare, and we're sort of bashing out all those details at the moment, and we've been preparing it for a while. Probably we've been working on it for like 5 months so far.
Oh, okay. I'll be very much looking forward to that. So it's time to move on to the last segment of the show. We like to make it a little bit more playful, so we'll have a round of rapid fire questions. I'll ask you 10 questions in total, with an either or question followed by an open question. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
This is rapid fire. So, Laurence, reciting or writing?
Reciting.
So, one-on-ones or collections?
One of ones.
Okay. Your dream collab?
Shit.
That's a hard one.
That's really hard, isn't it? I'm going to say Ruben Heinrich.
Okay. Interesting. Innovation or creativity?
Creativity.
Okay. Your biggest NFT regret?
It was being too enthusiastic at the very beginning with an extremely prominent collector who told me to get lost, because I was being passionate, but I think it came across like I was trying to sell my stuff. I guess it was like being a noob.
It's all right. We've all been there. What about your happiest NFT moment?
When Ruben said that he wanted to work with me on Dissolving Painting number 8.
No doubt. So the question before our last question, scripts or poems?
Poems.
Okay, and what's your favorite poem?
Oh my God. You did that. How could you ask that? I would say Jerusalem by William Blake.
All right. And could you recite a part of it for us?
Bring me my bow of burning gold. Bring me my chariots of fire.
Beautiful. Laurence, thanks a lot. Pleasure chatting with you. And I look forward to your future drops.
Thank you so much, Mo. That was a pleasure.
That's it. A super inspiring conversation with Laurence Fuller. If you've enjoyed it, please hit that subscribe button, because 2022 will be big for On The Ledger. This was On The Ledger from Paris with your host Moel Sayed. Till next time, take care. Au revoir. This content is provided for informational purposes only and is the sole expression of our opinion, and should not be relied upon as legal, business, investment, or tax advice. Do your own research. Any loss or profit is your sole responsibility. Stay safe.